You've got to be kidding me. The words cut through the hangar like a blade. Technical Sergeant Bradford stood with his arms crossed, staring at the elderly man in worn coveralls who had just shuffled through the massive steel doors. "Command sent us a grandfather?" Walter Harrison, 81 years old, said nothing. His weathered hands, scarred and spotted with age, gripped a faded canvas tool bag. His pale gray eyes weren't on the sneering young sergeant. They were locked on the silent C-130 Hercules, sitting dead in the center of the hangar. Bradford stepped forward, blocking his path. "Sir, this is a restricted maintenance area. We're dealing with a critical avionics failure on a $70 million aircraft. We need actual specialists, not—" He gestured dismissively at Walter's ancient tool bag. "Whatever this is." The other mechanics, all in their 20s, exchanged smirks. They'd been fighting this bird for 4 days straight. The last thing they needed was some relic from the Cold War era wasting their time. Walter took a slow step forward. His work boots scuffed softly against the polished concrete. "She's talking," he said quietly, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Can you hear what she's saying?" Bradford scoffed. "The only thing she's saying is that her entire digital flight control system is fried. Before we continue, if you've ever been underestimated because of your age or experience, type respect below. And tell me where you're watching from. This story proves that wisdom and hands-on knowledge can't be replaced by screens and algorithms. I rate every comment." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the cavernous space. Bradford tapped his ruggedized tablet with an aggressive finger, the screen glowing with cascading error codes. "We've run every diagnostic protocol in the book. The main flight computer won't sync with the autopilot system. The FADEC units are throwing fault codes we can't trace. We've replaced every circuit board, every data bus connector, every single LRU in the avionics bay." He looked up from his screen, his young face tight with frustration and exhaustion. "We've had a team of 6 certified technicians working around the clock. This bird is supposed to fly a critical supply mission to a forward operating base in 72 hours. If we can't get her airborne, soldiers don't get their equipment. So forgive me if I'm not impressed by—" He waved a hand at Walter's tool bag. "Whatever antiques you brought with you." Walter's gaze hadn't left the aircraft. He walked slowly toward it, his movements unhurried, almost meditative. Bradford moved to intercept him again, but this time a young woman, Airman Parker, stepped slightly forward. She'd been watching the exchange with growing discomfort. There was something about the old man, something in the quiet dignity of his bearing that didn't match Bradford's dismissive assessment. "Sergeant," she said softly, "maybe we should let him—" "Stay in your lane, Parker," Bradford snapped without looking at her. He pulled out his radio. "I'm calling the duty officer. This is a waste of time we don't have." Walter set his tool bag down on a nearby workbench with a soft thud. The canvas was stained with decades of oil and grease, its zipper held together with wire in 2 places. He began to unroll it with careful, practiced movements. Inside were tools that looked like they belonged in a museum. Wrenches with wooden handles worn smooth and dark, screwdrivers with blades that had been resharpened so many times they were half their original width, pliers with grips wrapped in electrical tape. A younger mechanic, barely out of technical school, actually laughed out loud. "Dude, are those from World War II?" Bradford smirked. "Probably Korea, at least." He turned back to Walter, his voice dripping with condescension. "Sir, I appreciate that you probably did good work back in your day, but this is a modern aircraft with computerized systems. It's not something you can fix by hitting it with a hammer and hoping for the best." Walter picked up a strange-looking wrench, its head bent at an unusual angle that seemed wrong, almost broken. His gnarled fingers closed around it with the ease of long familiarity. The weight of it in his hand was a known quantity, a comfort. "Did you check the hydraulic pressure regulators manually?" Walter asked, his voice still quiet, still calm. Bradford threw his hands up. "Manually?" "Sir, the diagnostics cleared the entire hydraulic system. Pressure is nominal across all 4 independent circuits. This isn't a hydraulic problem. It's an electronic ghost in the machine. It's not something you can feel or listen to. It's binary. It either works or it doesn't." "The diagnostics can lie," Walter said simply. He turned the wrench over in his hand, examining it as if seeing it for the first time in years. "They only see what they're programmed to look for." Bradford's patience, already worn thin by 4 sleepless days, finally snapped. His face flushed red. "That's it. I don't have time for this folk wisdom nonsense. You are not touching this aircraft." He pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. "I'm emailing the wing maintenance officer right now. This is completely unacceptable. We requested a senior avionics specialist from the depot, someone with current certifications on C-130J systems, and they send us a dinosaur," Walter offered, without malice. "I didn't say that," Bradford shot back, though his expression said otherwise. "I'm saying that technology has moved on. Everything on this bird is fly-by-wire, computer-controlled, digitally monitored. Your experience is from a different era. It doesn't apply here." From her position near the aircraft's nose gear, Airman Parker felt her stomach knot. She was new to the unit, still learning the unwritten rules, but she knew disrespect when she saw it, and this felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. She glanced at the work order clipped to her own tablet. The name jumped out at her. Walter Harrison, Special Consultant, requested by Major General Kelsey. The General himself had requested this man. That meant something. That meant everything. One of the older mechanics, a staff sergeant named Coleman, who'd been quietly observing from near the wing, finally spoke up. "Bradford, maybe we should—" "Should what, Coleman? Let Grandpa Moses here wave his magic wrench at a $250 million aircraft?" Bradford was on a roll now, feeding off the nervous laughter of the younger airmen. "This isn't the 1960s. We don't fix complex avionics by instinct and prayer anymore." Walter reached into his tool bag and pulled out another tool. This one a simple screwdriver with a dark wooden handle, worn completely smooth. He held it up to the light, and for a moment, everyone saw it. The handle was carved with initials, J.H. 1945. "My father made this," Walter said quietly, speaking to the tool more than to the men around him. "He was a carpenter, built furniture. When I joined the Air Force in 1961, he gave it to me. Said a good tool in the right hands could build anything, fix anything, save anything." The laughter died. There was something in his voice, a weight of memory that commanded respect despite Bradford's efforts. "I used this screwdriver to repair a B-52's engine mounting bracket over Guam during a typhoon," Walter continued, his voice distant. "Used it to rebuild a fuel pump on an F-111 in total darkness during a mortar attack in Thailand. Used it to hand-tighten every bolt on a Huey's transmission after a crash landing in a jungle clearing while wounded men were bleeding out behind me." He set the screwdriver down gently on the workbench. "It's just a screwdriver, but it's seen more combat, more emergencies, more impossible situations than everyone in this hangar combined. And it never failed me once." Bradford opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. But his pride wouldn't let him back down, not in front of his team. "That's all very inspiring, sir. But we need solutions, not war stories. This aircraft has a digital problem that requires digital solutions." Airman Parker made a decision. While Bradford was busy trying to reassert his authority, she slipped away from the group. She moved quickly toward the hangar office, her heart pounding. She pulled out her personal phone with shaking hands. She didn't have Major General Kelsey's number, but she had something almost as good. During her initial orientation, she'd met the Command Chief Master Sergeant, a gray-haired woman named Rivera, who'd made it clear her door was always open for airmen who saw something wrong. Parker dialed the number. It rang twice. "Command Chief's office. This is Airman Parker from the 63rd Maintenance Squadron," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I need to speak with Chief Rivera immediately. It's about Mr. Walter Harrison, the consultant that General Kelsey sent. Sergeant Bradford is about to have him removed from the hangar." There was a pause. Not the empty silence of a deadline, but a heavy, loaded quiet that seemed to stretch forever. Then, "Hold one, Airman." Parker could hear muffled voices, the sound of a chair scraping back hard against a floor, urgent footsteps. When the voice came back, it was Chief Rivera herself. "Airman Parker, you did the right thing calling me. Don't let anyone touch Mr. Harrison. I'll handle this personally." The line went dead. Parker walked back into the hangar on unsteady legs, trying to keep her face neutral. Bradford was still lecturing Walter, his voice rising, his gestures becoming more animated. The other mechanics stood in an awkward semicircle, some looking uncomfortable, others still smirking. No one noticed the distant sound of a vehicle approaching at high speed, its tires screeching as it took the corner toward their hangar. Walter had stopped responding to Bradford's tirade. He simply stood there, his eyes moving methodically over the C-130's massive airframe. He was reading it. Not with instruments or computers, but with decades of accumulated knowledge, with an understanding of aircraft that went deeper than any technical manual. He walked slowly around the landing gear, running his weathered hand along the metal skin. His fingers traced panel lines, felt vibrations, sensed temperatures. To Bradford and the younger mechanics, it looked like the wandering of a confused old man. To those with eyes to see, it was a master craftsman communing with his medium. "The starboard main landing gear," Walter said suddenly. "There's heat coming from inside the wheel well." Bradford pulled up diagnostics on his tablet. "The heat sensors in that bay are all green, normal operating temperature." "The sensors are wrong," Walter said simply. He knelt down, his old knees protesting, and pressed his ear against the gear strut. He closed his eyes, listening. After a long moment, he stood up slowly, using the aircraft itself for support. "There's a harmonic vibration in the hydraulic accumulator mount. Very faint. It's throwing the pressure sensors off by a fraction of a percent. Too small for your computers to flag as an error." "That's impossible," Bradford said flatly. "The hydraulic system has been completely cleared by diagnostics." "Then your diagnostics are incomplete," Walter replied. There was no anger in his voice, no defensiveness. Just a statement of fact from a man who had no need to prove himself. Staff Sergeant Coleman, who'd been quietly watching, moved closer. He was older than the others, maybe 45, with enough years in to remember when things were done differently. "Mr. Harrison, how can you hear a vibration that doesn't show up on any of our equipment?" Walter looked at him, and for the first time, there was the ghost of a smile. "Because I learned from men who learned from men who learned from men who built these machines with their hands, before computers, before digital sensors, when all you had was your eyes, your ears, and your fingers." He turned to face the group fully. "In 1968, I was a young mechanic at Da Nang Air Base. We had a C-130A that kept losing hydraulic pressure mid-flight, brought her down 3 times for inspections. Every gauge said the system was perfect, every test came back clean. But pilots kept reporting mushy controls on final approach." The younger mechanics had stopped smirking. There was something hypnotic about the way he spoke, the absolute certainty in his gravelly voice. "So I did what my chief taught me to do. I stopped looking at the gauges and started listening to the plane. I put my hand on the accumulator housing during engine run-up and felt it. A tiny vibration, so small you'd never notice it unless you were looking for it. Turned out there was a micro-fracture in the mounting bracket. Every time the engine spooled up, it flexed just enough to throw the pressure sensors off." He pulled that strange bent wrench from his tool bag again. "I designed this tool specifically to reach that bracket. Had the machine shop fabricate it for me. Used it to fix 14 C-130s in 3 months. Every single one had the same problem. The engineers at Lockheed eventually redesigned the bracket because of what we found." Bradford's face was pale now. That's a good story, but..." "It's not a story," a new voice said from the hangar entrance. Everyone turned. Chief Master Sergeant Rivera stood in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun. She was a small woman, barely over 5 feet tall, but her presence filled the space. Behind her, visible through the open door, was a black staff car with 2-star plates. Major General Kelsey was here. "It's not a story," Rivera repeated, walking into the hangar. "It's Air Force history. It's in the official maintenance records for the C-130A fleet. The Harrison bracket fix is still taught at the schoolhouse." She stopped directly in front of Bradford, who had gone rigid at attention. And you, Technical Sergeant, just spent the last 20 minutes insulting the man who literally wrote the book you studied to get your certification. Bradford's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The staff car door opened and Major General Kelsey stepped out. He was a tall man with silver hair and a chest full of ribbons that told the story of a career spent in service. He walked into the hangar with the purposeful stride of command authority, and every airman present snapped to attention so fast the collective movement created a small breeze. The general walked past all of them without a glance. He walked directly to Walter Harrison, stopped 3 feet away, and executed a salute so sharp, so perfect, it could have been used in a training video. "Chief Master Sergeant Harrison," General Kelsey said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute respect. "It is an honor to have you on my base, sir." Walter returned the salute with a small nod, the gesture of a man long removed from formal military protocol, but understanding the respect being shown. "General." Kelsey turned to face the assembled mechanics, his expression transforming from warmth to ice in an instant. "Does anyone here know who this is?" Silence. Even Bradford seemed to have lost his voice. "This," the general said, his tone sharp enough to cut steel, "is Chief Master Sergeant Walter Harrison, retired, 41 years of active service. He has more flight hours maintaining combat aircraft than all of you have been alive, combined." He walked to the C-130, running his hand along its wing with something approaching reverence. When the C-130 Hercules was having catastrophic engine failures during high-altitude operations in 1972, the engineers at Lockheed couldn't figure it out. They were ready to ground the entire fleet. Chief Harrison, then a technical sergeant, was in Vietnam. He diagnosed the problem in 6 hours, designed a field modification in 12, and had birds back in the air within 36. The general's voice dropped, becoming almost conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. That modification is still part of the standard C-130 maintenance protocol. It saved approximately 4,000 aircraft and countless lives over the past 50 years. He turned back to Bradford, whose face had gone from red to white to a sickly gray. When the AC-130 Spectre gunship program was having targeting computer synchronization problems in 1989, they called Chief Harrison out of his assignment to personally fly to every base and fix them by hand. 16 aircraft across 4 continents in 3 months. General Kelsey walked slowly around the group, making eye contact with each young mechanic. "During Desert Storm, when we were trying to maintain a 24-hour flight tempo in a sandstorm environment that was destroying engines faster than we could replace them, Chief Harrison developed a field filtration system using materials we had on hand. It increased engine life by 400%. The Air Force gave him the Meritorious Service Medal for that innovation. It's still used today in desert operations." Staff Sergeant Coleman, who had been standing at rigid attention, spoke carefully. "Sir, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know," the general said, his voice softening slightly. "Because men like Chief Harrison don't brag about their accomplishments. They don't demand recognition. They simply do the work, solve the problems, and move on to the next impossible task." He paused. "But I know. Because when I was a brand new second lieutenant fresh out of the academy, my C-130 lost hydraulics on final approach at Ramstein. The landing gear wouldn't come down. We were 30 seconds from ejecting when a voice came over the radio." Kelsey's expression softened with memory. "Lieutenant, this is Chief Harrison in maintenance control. Don't eject yet. Try cycling your hydraulic bypass switch 3 times, pause 5 seconds, then hit your emergency gear extension." I thought he was crazy, but I was out of options. I did exactly what he said. The general looked at Walter with something approaching awe. "All 3 gear came down. Green lights across the board. We landed safely. After we shut down, I climbed out of that cockpit, walked straight to maintenance control, and asked Chief Harrison how he knew that would work. You know what he told me?" Walter smiled faintly. "I told you I'd seen that exact malfunction 17 times before, and that sometimes the problem isn't the system. It's the sequence." "It's the sequence," the general repeated. "I never forgot that. And I never forgot the man who saved my life and my crew that day." He turned back to Bradford. So when this C-130 went down with a mysterious fault that stumped an entire maintenance squadron, I called the one man I knew could fix it. And you, Technical Sergeant Bradford, decided to treat him like a doddering old fool who wandered into your hangar by mistake. The silence that followed was crushing. Even the distant sound of aircraft on the flight line seemed to have stopped, as if the entire base were holding its breath. Chief Rivera stepped forward. Technical Sergeant Bradford, you're relieved of duty. Report to the wing commander's office immediately. Bradford's career was over, and everyone in the hangar knew it. He walked out like a man heading to his own execution, his shoulders slumped, his tablet hanging uselessly in one hand. General Kelsey turned his attention back to Walter, his voice gentle now, almost apologetic. Chief, I'm deeply sorry for the reception you received. There's no excuse for that kind of disrespect. Walter waved a hand dismissively. They're good kids, General, just young. They trust the machines more than their instincts. They've been taught that way. He looked at the remaining mechanics, who were staring at him with a mixture of awe and shame. It's not wrong to trust technology, but you can't let it make you deaf to what the aircraft is trying to tell you. He walked back to the C-130, his steps slow but purposeful. A plane is like any living thing. It talks to you, through sound, through vibration, through heat patterns. You just have to learn its language. He placed both hands flat against the fuselage near the landing gear. This girl is in pain. She's been trying to tell you for days, but you've been listening to your computers instead of listening to her. The hangar was silent, except for the soft hum of ventilation systems. Every eye was on the old man and the massive aircraft. Walter knelt again by the starboard main gear, pulling out the bent wrench that had been mocked earlier. He reached deep into the wheel well, his arm disappearing up to the shoulder. For several long seconds, he worked blind, his face a mask of concentration. His tongue stuck out slightly between his lips, an unconscious gesture of focus. There was a soft click, then another, then a third, each one barely audible. Walter pulled his arm out, stood up with considerable effort, and wiped his hands on an old rag from his pocket. There, he said simply. Try her now. General Kelsey looked at Chief Rivera, who nodded to Airman Parker. Parker, you're qualified on C-130 systems. Get up there and run a start sequence. Parker practically ran to the crew ladder. She climbed into the cockpit, her heart hammering in her chest. She'd only been certified on the C-130 for 6 months. She'd never started one without supervision. And now she was doing it with a major general watching. She strapped into the pilot's seat, her hands moving through the familiar pre-start checklist on muscle memory alone. She looked down through the cockpit window at Walter, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. She flipped the battery switch. Green lights. She engaged the auxiliary power unit. It spooled up normally, its familiar whine filling the aircraft. Then she reached for the #1 engine start switch. Her hand hesitated. 4 days. 4 days of failed attempts, of cascading errors, of systems that refused to cooperate. What if it didn't work? What if the old man was wrong? But then she saw him down there, standing next to a 2-star general who had called him by his rank and thanked him for saving his life. She saw Chief Rivera, arms crossed, watching with absolute confidence. She saw the other mechanics, no longer smirking, but waiting with held breath. Airman Parker took a deep breath and flipped the switch. For one agonizing second, nothing happened. The starter motor engaged with its characteristic whine, building speed. Then, deep in the aircraft's belly, something fundamental shifted. A low rumble started, growing into a thunderous roar as the #1 turboprop engine caught, spooled up, and settled into a smooth, powerful idle. The mechanics erupted in shouts and applause. Parker, tears streaming down her face, quickly started engines 2, 3, and 4. Each one came to life without hesitation, without error, without a single warning light. The C-130 Hercules, silent and dead for 4 days, was alive again. Its 4 massive propellers turning in perfect synchronization, their distinctive sound filling the hangar with mechanical music. Parker shut down the engines in proper sequence and climbed out of the cockpit. Her legs were shaking so badly she nearly fell off the ladder. When she reached the hangar floor, she walked directly to Walter and executed the best salute of her young career. "Thank you, Chief," she said, her voice choked with emotion. Walter returned her salute, then did something unexpected. He held out his hand for a handshake. "You did good, Airman. Smooth start sequence. Your instructor would be proud." As they shook hands, General Kelsey approached. "Chief, I don't suppose you could stay for a few days? I think our maintenance crews could benefit from your expertise." Walter smiled. That small, quiet smile that held a lifetime of stories. "I think I can arrange that, General." Over the next 3 days, something remarkable happened in Hangar 7. Word had spread across the base with the speed of wildfire. The legendary Chief Master Sergeant Harrison was here. He was real, and he was teaching. What started as a small group of curious mechanics grew into standing room-only sessions. Walter didn't lecture from a podium. He taught the way he'd always taught, with his hands on the aircraft, his tools spread out on a workbench, and his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades of experience. "Come here," he'd say to a young airman struggling with a stubborn bolt. "Feel this. Your wrench is telling you something. It's not stripped. It's cross-threaded. Feel how it wants to back out if you turn it counterclockwise? Let it tell you what it needs." Or he'd place a mechanic's hand on a running engine mount. "Close your eyes, feel that? That's a harmonic vibration. It's not supposed to be there. The diagnostics won't catch it because it's within acceptable parameters, but it's the first sign of a failing damper. Replace it now, and it's a 20-minute job. Wait for it to show up on the computer, and it's 8 hours of teardown." Staff Sergeant Coleman became Walter's unofficial assistant, following him everywhere, absorbing everything like a sponge. He'd been in the Air Force for 23 years, but watching Walter work was like discovering a new language he'd never known existed. "Chief?" Coleman asked one afternoon as they worked on a hydraulic actuator. "How do you just know this stuff? I've got all the tech data, all the manuals, all the training, but you just look at something and see what's wrong." Walter was quiet for a moment, his hands working steadily. "You know how you can tell when someone you love is upset, even if they say they're fine? You can hear it in their voice, see it in how they move, feel it in the air around them." Coleman nodded. "It's like that," Walter said. "You spend enough years with these birds, they become like family. You learn their moods, their quirks, their tells. A C-130 that's happy sounds different than one that's hurting. You just have to pay attention." He pulled a component free, examined it, and pointed to a hairline crack invisible to the naked eye. "See this? This is what pain looks like on an aircraft. You can't measure it with a computer. You have to know what you're looking at." On the 3rd day, General Kelsey arranged something special. He'd invited maintenance chiefs from 3 other wings to come and listen to Walter. The base's largest briefing room was packed with over 200 people, from brand-new airmen to crusty chief master sergeants who'd been turning wrenches since before most of their subordinates were born. Walter stood at the front, looking uncomfortable with the attention. He held up his father's old screwdriver, the one with the carved initials. "My father gave me this in 1961, he began. "I was 18 years old, fresh out of basic training, thought I knew everything. He sat me down and told me something I didn't understand until years later. He said, 'Son, this tool isn't magic. It's just steel and wood. But in the right hands, guided by patience and respect and knowledge passed down through generations, it can do impossible things.'" Walter set the screwdriver down gently. "Every single one of you has tools, but tools are only as good as the hands that hold them and the wisdom that guides them. When you're working on an aircraft, you're not just fixing a machine, you're maintaining a legacy. You're protecting the lives of the men and women who will fly that bird into harm's way. That's a sacred responsibility." He looked out at the sea of faces. "The computers are tools too, powerful tools, but they're not infallible. They can't feel a vibration that's just barely outside normal parameters. They can't hear the subtle change in an engine's tone that means a bearing is starting to fail. They can't see the invisible stress fracture that's developing in a critical component." He tapped his chest. "That wisdom lives here. In you. In the experience you build over years of working on these aircraft. In the knowledge passed down from the mechanics who came before you. Don't ever dismiss that. Don't ever let a computer convince you to ignore what your hands are telling you. Chief Master Sergeant Rivera stood up from the front row. Chief Harrison, on behalf of the entire Air Force maintenance community, I want to thank you for your service, your innovation, and your willingness to pass on your knowledge to the next generation. The room erupted in applause. Not polite ceremonial applause, but genuine, thunderous appreciation. People stood. The applause went on for almost a full minute. When it finally died down, Rivera continued. I've spoken with Air Force Materiel Command. They want to establish a formal mentorship program pairing experienced retired maintainers with active duty squadrons. They're calling it the Harrison Heritage Initiative. Walter looked genuinely surprised. That's a real honor, Chief. You've earned it, sir, Rivera said, 10 times over. 6 months later, in hangars across the Air Force, gray-haired veterans started showing up to work alongside young mechanics. They brought their old tools, their hard-won wisdom, and their respect for the machines that had defined their lives. Maintenance squadrons that had been struggling with mysterious faults started solving problems in hours instead of days. The rate of repeat failures dropped by 37% across the fleet. More importantly, a generation of mechanics started learning to listen to the aircraft themselves, to trust their hands and their instincts alongside their diagnostic tablets. Technical Sergeant Bradford, after a thorough review and a formal reprimand, was reassigned to a desk job in supply. But 6 months into his punishment, he did something unexpected. He submitted a request to transfer back to maintenance and to participate in the Harrison Heritage Initiative. His request was denied initially, but Walter Harrison himself intervened. Everyone deserves a second chance, Walter wrote in his recommendation letter. I've made mistakes too. The measure of a person isn't whether they fail, it's whether they learn from it. Bradford was accepted into the program. His mentor was a 78-year-old former crew chief who'd maintained B-52s during the Cold War. Within a year, Bradford had become one of the program's most vocal advocates, teaching younger mechanics to balance technology with traditional hands-on expertise. In a small diner off base on a Tuesday afternoon, Walter Harrison sat at the counter drinking black coffee. The bell over the door chimed. Bradford walked in, now wearing Staff Sergeant stripes again, hard-earned after his demotion, and climbed back up. He slid onto the stool next to Walter without asking. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Bradford pulled out a worn notebook. Chief, I was wondering if you could tell me about that hydraulic accumulator mount issue you diagnosed in Vietnam. I want to understand how you knew to look there. Walter smiled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out that bent wrench, setting it on the counter between them. Well, he said, his eyes bright with memory, it all started on a runway in Da Nang during a mortar attack, when a C-130 came in with control problems. To everyone who typed respect and shared where you're watching from, thank you for standing with our heroes. Subscribe for more stories like this and unsung American heroes. See you in the next one.